So we're still here at Nokia World 2009 in Stuttgart, Germany, and I'm now sitting here with my friend Rafe Blandford of All About Symbian.
Hello everybody.
And we just wanted to kind of chat about the week and some of the different things that we've noticed about Nokia World and the differences specifically. Rafe and I have both been to several Nokia Worlds, and so it's interesting to look at the timeline and how Nokia has changed in terms of their products and announcement and the messages that they're doing. So what things did you notice that might a change over the past few years that might signify something changing in Nokia?
Well, I think the big thing is that Nokia World was typically a kind of a strategy event, business to business, and here they've kind of combined it with device launches that was traditionally kind of something like the Go Play event or the N series launch events. And so we've had 6 new devices, 3 of which were pre-announced. But also in terms of just the way the whole atmosphere feels, I think there's a bigger emphasis on the conversation and interactivity rather than it being Nokia broadcasting its message. It's also listening to the conversation. I think that's reflected on the show floor by the open platforms there were, the encouragement for people to blog about their thoughts, to use the Twitter hashtag. And hearing that mentioned on the stage at Nokia World is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And you still get the same external speakers, but you also get Nokia mentioning themselves in the context of the industry. It's not just all Nokia, they're saying we're doing this, and they don't mind mentioning the competitors, which does add to the overall open feel of the event. And it's partly smart messaging from Nokia, and they're well trained to get their message across. But
yeah.
I think it does feel more open to it as a conversation, would be the way I'd describe it.
I think that's fair. One thing that I've noticed is, like you mentioned, even 2 years ago in Amsterdam, the only thing they really announced was Comes With Music. And they gave a little bit of clarification on their OV stuff, but not much. And then last year, we had one product announcement, the N97. And it actually seems to me like in the past 12 months, Nokia's done less product announcements at other events where they share the focus. And they're definitely owning Nokia World more so, like as you mentioned, with new products and even so-called Nokia Week last week, where they announced half of what they wanted to announce this week, they announced the week before. So that it's been kind of 2 weeks of Nokia, which is really kind of interesting to see them do. I also noticed in the keynote speeches and the marketing of these new products that they're a lot more aggressive. The N900 ad, the video ad, is completely different from any other ad that they've done. The N series are typically somewhat laid back in terms of the music and just the branding overall feel of it, whereas the N900 is very in-your-face, aggressive feel to the video. And I think that that's kind of signified here as well. Like you mentioned, they mentioning themselves specifically in the context and not just, this is what we're doing, but we're doing this in not necessarily in response, but in reference to everything else that's going on.
And I think the interesting thing is, there's 2 key themes that I would draw out. You talked about the fact there's more device announcements. I think part of that's about the fact that the device portfolio is widening, and that's partly in mobile phones, and basically mobile phone is still a growth area. There's still more of them. Smartphones are a rapidly growing market. And yes, at the moment sales have dipped in terms of mobile phones because of the economic cycle, but relatively speaking there's still an ever-increasing range. You add on to that something like the booklet, which is their first computer device, and the N900, which I'd say is equally a new device area for them to be exploring. But also we heard, as you said, with Obi launched a couple of years ago at Go Play, we're now hearing much more about the service solutions at these events, and that's a whole other side to Nokia, and that's the sort of the dichotomy now between devices. And actually devices is not enough, as OPK is fond of saying. And things like the Obi Maps Player API being announced here, the improvements to Nokia messaging, improvements to some of the other Nokia services, with Maps, for example, the live broadcasting with the integration with Facebook, all of those on their own would have been quite significant announcements. And so there's this double whammy, if you like, and that does, Nokia's becoming a solutions company and the devices, so there's even more to announce and talk about. And it really impressed me, for example, that they're saying all the beta solutions we're showing off here available for everyone on the web to try within 48 hours.
Yeah.
Big change, the immediate availability, the N900 being available in October,
right,
and all the other handsets being available in less than 6 months, and most of them are basically being on the market for Christmas.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of, we're both pretty stalwart Symbian fans, and we now have this new, extremely sexy N series with MIMO on there. And I've definitely used MIMO devices in the past and had mixed feelings on them, and obviously relaunched MIMO Guru. So what are your thoughts on Nokia's adding MIMO to the N-series kind of flagship product line?
Well, I think in some ways, and I'll be controversial for this video.
Okay.
In some ways, MIMO hasn't really changed. You know, it's still a niche product, and the N900, whichever way you look at it, is a niche product. The fact that it's a lot more sexy and it has the operator substitute because it has a cellular radio suddenly makes it more interesting, and because of that, it probably will sell significantly more than any of the sort of tablet devices did. But I think it's actually fair to say that the N900 is as much an evolution of MIMO as it is a new phone. And actually, I think the fact it's a phone is really not that big a deal. It's just one app on the phone. And, you know, I think several of the Nokia executives talked about this and sort of saying it's really a way of Nokia exploring a new area. Now, there is an interesting debate is why didn't they do that on the Symbian? I think the truth is the OS is perfectly capable. The UI in the form of a 65th edition isn't. But I think even if a 65th edition had evolved, it's still phone-centric, so they've had to do a completely new UI, and, you know, for sake of argument, call it S90, just to be really controversial. On top of it, that was sort of data-centric, or rather mobile computer-centric. And they've talked about the way that MIMO is computer-based because of things like the multitasking, but that's really a functionality of the UI, not the OS, in my opinion at least. And I actually think the MIMO switch comes down to leveraging open source software assets upstream to reduce development times, and it allows them to effectively experiment at a faster pace, which is very important, as we know, at the high-end devices. And that's a really interesting thing, because I think what effectively happens is MIMO will be used almost as a kind of a sandbox, which all the cool stuff will be tried on it, but it will very quickly transition to Symbian if it turns out to be good. Because what Nokia really emphasised here is actually Symbian is becoming their main platform. It'll take time, but it will display Series 40 as their most popular platform.
Right. And
MIMO, you know, is actually, relatively speaking, a niche area. You know, it's still got the potential in a couple of years' time to be doing, you know, 10, 20 million devices a year, but that's going to be measured next to, you know, probably a couple of 100 million Symbian devices. And I've had debate with both you and others here saying, actually, I think the N97 Mini is going to outsell the N900. I'm actually going to go on the record, and I think the N97 Mini will probably sell at least 4 times as many as the N900. And I know you probably won't agree with that.
I don't, but not necessarily. If it is, it's not necessarily because the N97 is that much, or the N900 is that much better. So
yeah, well, I think
it'd be interesting to see.
So yeah,
nonetheless,
I'll be curious. N97 Mini, I really think it's a really fantastic little device, much more so than the actual N97 was originally.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
partly about the version 2 software, but it's also the actual device. It just feels better in the hand, the materials is nice. That little size reduction, although it's only measured in millimeters, I think makes a really big difference.
Yeah.
So for people who haven't got the N97, the Mini, actually, if you want something phone-centric, and arguably it does all the same things that the N900 does, admittedly without some of the graphical whiz and not quite as good in terms of technical video and what have you. When it comes to browsing the web, maps, email, whatever the core functions, are pretty much you can do the same stuff even if it's admittedly without the kind of the whiz and the shine.
Yeah. So what's your favorite device that was announced at Nokia World this year?
My favorite device announced. That's a tricky one, because there's kind of the personal viewpoint in which, yeah, I want to play with an N900, but I think I'd maybe pick out the 5230, the $150 smartphone, €150 smartphone, as being really nice, and then the booklet was probably the biggest surprise to me in terms of a professional device. You know, really nice.
Very cool. Thanks so much for joining us for video of Rafe.
Thanks, Ricky.
And,
always good to chat.
Yes, we'll see you again soon.
Cheers.
Yes.